Hey folks, Marc Elias here. Today we are here with Pascal Losambe, PhD. He is a school administrator at one of our educational institutions near New Albany. He is an awesome guy. I'm really excited to get to know you more, Pascal. Thanks for joining me, man.
What a pleasure, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on here.
Yeah. Just to begin with, you're South African. You were born in Nigeria, but you grew up in South Africa.
Correct. My family, our core and our nucleus, and where we came from is the Democratic Republic of the Congo,
Mhm.
which is the former Zaire. But I wasn't born there. I was born in Nigeria, in Ado Ekiti, where my dad was studying. He was getting a doctorate, a PhD at the University of Ibadan in English literature, kind of post-colonial theory, Caribbean, and literature from that has its core in Black Africa, Caribbean, etc. And so that was a tremendous legacy that I grew up with and that he passed down, which is pretty amazing. And from Nigeria, we actually moved to a small country within South Africa called Swaziland. And we lived there for a few years as my dad was doing some work, and then we moved to South Africa, um, where I spent most of my formative years. And then after South Africa, my dad got a wonderful opportunity at the University of Vermont. And so he said, "Hey, we are moving to America." And as a result, we made the journey, and here we are. We went to Vermont and we lived life there for a while, and then I was able to progress and end up in Ohio.
Wow. How long were you in Vermont for?
So so I also went to college, undergraduate. My education was in Vermont as well. So we were there from 2001. I was there, I should say, from 2001 to about 2007.
Mhm.
Then I moved on to Boston, where I spent a few years in graduate school. From Boston, I went to Richmond, Virginia, where I started teaching and educating. From Virginia to Indiana, where my in-laws live, because we started to have kids and decided we needed a little more support. And then from Indiana, we came to Ohio.
Wow. Talk about Nigeria, Congo, um, South Africa, Vermont. I mean, you've really lived in a lot of different places.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Vermont is a nice way of life. It's real chill. It's real chill.
It is, and what I found was a tremendous embrace from the people that lived there. It was different because I came from a community where there were a lot of people that shared my identity, my racial and my ethnic identity, to Vermont, where there weren't a lot of people that looked like me or shared the same identity that I did. However, there's a certain warmth, there's a certain embracing that the people of Vermont have that really we experienced as a family. And till this day, it has a little piece of my heart. So, whenever anybody talks about Vermont or Burlington or wherever, my mind kind of perks up and says, "Yeah, I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about."
Yeah. We used to go to Vermont every winter, and Burlington was where there's a lot of shops and
Yes.
antiques, and we would find like a restaurant, and it's just one of those kind of like sleepy Vermont towns that are like just so has such a beautiful like a sense of peace to it.
Yes.
I just remember it being like a really special place. Got it. And so after Vermont, then you travel to Indiana, and you kind of made your way to Ohio.
Yes. Yes.
So how did you go from biology, the sciences, to education? How did that happen?
Yeah, growing up, I think I had this fascination for the natural world. I grew up very curious about nature and the human body and really became fascinated with trying to understand how it worked. And so when I enrolled in undergrad, I was a molecular biology and biochemistry major. And that allowed me to understand the processes of life, the nuances of life, to celebrate how formidable the human body was, And it started to open my eyes to the wonder of the world and the wonder of the human body. And then I went on to Boston College to study biology, where I was in a HIV lab. And HIV was very dear to my heart because Southern Africa is plagued with HIV. And the number of cases, the incidence of the disease is tremendous and deadly. And I really took the perspective of I really wanted to make an impact in this way, uh, to almost build a bridge almost. And I thought one day maybe I could offer my services in some way to that. So I was in a research lab doing research on the brain and HIV and the mechanisms of pathogenesis of the virus, especially as it relates to the nervous system. Um, and then I found myself loving research, but also loving the teaching aspect of things. And when I woke up at night and thought about what I wanted my life to be, the question of teaching always came up. We were teaching assistants for our professors, who were our lab mentors, and so um, I decided one day that I was going to put my pipette down and try my hand at teaching and see whether this is what I wanted to do with my life. And if not, then I could always come back to research. But as I started to teach, I started to fall in love with the practice of leadership, with the practice of leading an organization or an institution in a way that really elevated the status of the employees and really brought out the potential of that organization. Then, because of my experience in South Africa, as we dealt with post-apartheid integration and thought processes on how to do this community and unity well, I started to also think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this created a dilemma because I now started to fall in love with this social science and had my hard science. And where I live very much is a fusion of the two, where I can talk a little bit about the brain and human behavior and the nuances of the mechanisms of the brain, relate that to human behavior and see why we react a certain way, how we react a certain way, and even more importantly, what we can do to not live a life of passivity, of implicit learning, where we are not aware of what is going in, where we can take control of our minds, where we can affirm each other and validate each other. So I fell in love with that concept. And that is really my passion today.
That's great. Yeah, and you incorporate that into your role as an administrator in the local area schools. What came to my mind when you were talking about that, having a background in biology, is just what's happening with this virus. Your viewpoint is probably unique in that you've used a pipette and a electron microscope, and you've like actually kind of been in the lab looking at very similar things.
Yes,
What
yes.
I didn't know was that the coronavirus has existed in its many forms for a
Yes.
very long time. Um, there were SARS too, and these,
Yep.
there have been several of them. And I just thought this was a unique thing that just happened recently.
Agreed. The thing, and virology was kind of my area of study. Um, and what you notice about these viruses is, they are kind of named according to the proteins that exist on the outer core. And those proteins allow them to do different things. And that kind of determines how deadly they are, how pathogenic they are, is the target cells that they are attracted to. And how they often hijack the immune system of the body. And I think there are so many with COVID-19, there's so many similarities with what I studied with HIV, this hyperimmune activity leading to pathogenesis, because that's how the brain is actually affected. And COVID-19, especially its mechanism of insult to the body. And so it's really interesting to read the news, to read the reports, and to closely monitor what they're really discovering about this virus. And I'm always thinking through the lens of what I have studied in the past as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that's happening, is because I think people are kind of commingling, or rather confusing inconvenience for oppression. It is an inconvenience to wear that mask, to have your temperature taken at various, schools and temples and churches and so forth. But it's not oppression by any means, and it's just kind of a funny time where Americans are confusing that somehow. We're so used to having our liberties of freedom, and now it's like, yeah, there's some mandatory things you have to do to keep your neighbor safe. And there's a lot of resistance to that. It's kind of like children,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
eh, to some degree. Like, we're trying to train people to do the right thing to stop spreading this. But how's COVID impacted your role and the role of your staff and the local schools?
Yeah, it has impacted it on a few levels. Number one, I think we have started to realize how important our human connections are. We went online when COVID-19 hit, and as a result, we started to discover that this way of doing school is not the same as being in person. It's not the same as going to your colleague's office and saying, "How are you? How is the family doing?" Seeing their facial expressions, seeing their humanity. For the students, a lot of our relationship is personal, where we can, you know, conveniently check in and say, "Hey, can you just pop into the office and let me just see how you are doing?" There is almost another barrier, another layer to get that access. As a result, you have to go further with earning people's trust, because the online format is not it doesn't afford the same connectivity, the same human connections. A lot of our communication, two-thirds of it, in fact, is body language. And so it gets harder when somebody's wearing a mask or when they're online to read the nuances of their face. And so trust is not as easy. You have to go above and beyond. And that level of trust is something that we try to emphasize for ourselves and for our faculty, in that, we are in this format. However, our foundation has to be relationship and trust. And from that relationship and trust, the students will start to hear you. They'll start to bring more of themselves to conversations. They will allow you to push a little further. But because of the novelty, there are some barriers we had to overcome.
Yeah.
Then we have to say what is important at the end of the day is, we have to get through this material important, or is we need to make sure that our kids are socially, emotionally healthy. And from that place, start to say, what is the core of what they need to know in our classes? And as a result, let's teach them that. But first and foremost, say that we see you, we value you, we're here for you, we're here to support you. And everything kind of emanates from there.
Yeah. I also think that skill set that you're prioritizing is more worldly and more valuable for a
Mm-hmm.
long-term health, wellness. I think a lot of people thrive in a society with a high emotional quotient. You can learn through intelligence, you can practice, you can get skills through acquisition, exposure, your environment. But emotional quotient, that happens very early on. It's a slower acquisition, and I think your focus on that is really, really good. Yeah, that's one of the very positive impacts, I think, of this virus on the way education is happening.
Absolutely. I think you've analyzed that really well. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you're doing the coursework online. Are teachers coming into the facility?
So far, the expectation is that the teachers will be here.
Mhm.
However, um, there's a level of humanity as well, in terms of, if someone feels absolutely that, that staying home is the way that they'll be more effective, either with their well-being or the well-being of a loved one or people in their household, then they are afforded that option. But again, I think the in-person connectivity and connection and instruction it seems to be what our families are asking for. and it seems to be what will allow our our kids socio emotionally and how they will feel about their experience at school.
Oh,
Um, you
so
know,
they're going into school. I forgot.
yes, and so
Okay.
we have a model in place where it's going to be an alternating situation where there'll be a small number of kids on campus, some online, and then it's going to be kind of a rotation as well.
Got it. So do you receive guidance directly from DeWine, or is there another like body, institute, company that educational, schools take their guidance from?
Yeah, so we do. I mean, if the governor decrees a certain thing, then we have to fall in line with that. However, we have tremendous relationships with healthcare professionals, some governmental professionals that are we're really making an informed decision based on the data that we have.
Mhm.
And so I think I've been tremendously proud of our school and how thoughtful they've been to um, changing different classrooms, ensuring the ratios are there, changing different structures to make sure that our kids are socially distant. And so um, I think I find safety, and I really applaud our leadership for the hard work and thoughtfulness and the hours and hours and hours of conversations they've had with not only members of our community but experts in the field, and that has led us to this place. And as we prepare for the year, there is some comfort in that.
Or can schools, like, is there some room for interpretation of this guidance? Because some schools are doing a little bit different things than others. Like my son's kindergarten, who's soon to open in 2 or 3 weeks, they do temperatures at the front door, they record them, they ask you 3 questions. Has anyone in your home been exposed to COVID? Has your child had a fever in the last 48 hours? And are they experiencing any other symptoms? Um, do schools have like room for interpretation, or is this just like this is the guidelines and everyone does it the same?
I mean, I think there's a certain level of interpretation that has been afforded, especially from some governmental officials, where um, at the end of the day, the question that we have to ask at the fundamental level is what will be best for our students and our faculty. And if we feel as though we aren't in a place to provide that safety and guidance, then I think that is a factor that will drive a decision.
Yeah.
But I think the interpretation that is the fundamental question we have to answer. And again, I've been particularly proud of the fact that we have been informed and communicated with as a result.
Sure. My kids are young, so the the narrative, the common communication amongst my friends who also have young kids is like, how are we going to manage like working and having our kids at home without daycare? I'm a realtor. I, make my schedule, but still that's really, really difficult to be productive while caring for them at home. It's kind of like having two full-time jobs. What's the like most common feedback you're getting from parents? Are they similarly pushing for like school opening, or are they more apprehensive because the students are older and more independent?
Yeah, I think we have reactions all over the board. But at the end of the day, I think trust is built when there is clear communication and predictability in terms of what is to come.
Mhm.
And so as a result, that has been our foundation, and that's what the leadership of our school has done. So
Got it.
um, and at the end of the day, I think if families don't feel comfortable, then there is an avenue for them to have alternative options of learning through our school.
Oh, got it. So you have options based on the parents' comfort level. Oh,
Yes.
that's great. Yeah, that's really great. Tell me about your consulting company. I know that you were really excited about what you guys are doing, Synergy Consulting. Um, understand that it was about um, racial sensitivity,
Hmm.
um, how to um, you say it in your words because I'm going to totally butcher it. What are the, who are some of the clients, and what's the value add that Synergy is providing?
Yeah, so I think what Synergy provides is we strive to create a new narrative. Right now, I think that the narrative that we are used to seeing and the narrative that we are being exposed to as a society is one of division, where people are taking sides and having their opinions and not communicating well. However, where Synergy comes in, again, leveraging this strong foundation about the brain and human behavior, is recognizing that the place to start is that we all have some fundamental needs as human beings. 70 years ago, Abraham Maslow said that we have 5 needs that lead us to be motivated in life, that lead to self-actualization. And those fundamental needs are your physiological needs, your food, your air, your water. Then you have what he calls safety needs, to be free from danger, consistency of relationships, etc. Then above that, you have love and belonging, your need for connection, for relationship, for love. And then esteem needs, which is your need for status, to be respected, to be affirmed, to be validated. And then at the top, you have self-actualization, to live your best life, to be able to live a life where you are maximizing your creativity, maximizing your potential, etc. We start from that place. However, there are certain external factors that affect the way we experience those needs. And those factors start to actually shape our mind and our brain in certain ways that lead us to react in different ways. And so when we start to understand that the needs you have, Mark, are the same needs I have, Mark, and when we are talking on whatever side we want to take, we are talking about the same thing and maybe talking about a different way to get to it. However, when we take responsibility for our shared humanity, when we celebrate the differences that we have in unity, that is what we use to progress as a society. If I can ask you, Mark, how are you experiencing my organizational culture or my societal culture, and understand what it means for you with your experiences, with your life circumstances to feel valued, validated? If I can meet you at that place, then we both achieve. We both um, lead to a good outcome. And the business case is there. There have been numerous articles that have been published to show the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh yeah, I definitely could believe that. It's good for culture. People feel good when other people feel good.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so there, not only is it an effect to culture, but to the bottom line. I mean, without a doubt, the result, there have been studies, as I'm sure you know, about how inclusion and culture impact the bottom line directly. I just wonder why more leaders aren't, putting that in play. I think just a lot of leaders are old school. They're kind of used to the way they're doing it, and that's been kind of the norm. You have to, I think, just it's human nature to not look for innovation unless something is not working. And what's great about a lot of the dialogue that's occurring now with Black Lives Matter is it's really putting a spotlight on how we do things, and it's having people revisit their approaches to everything from business to communication to social services, policing. It's painful, but it's productive.
Yeah, and I think as a society, we are in a place where we emphasize either or, where it's one or the other. But I'd like to insert a big and in there. We need to get out of the mindset of it's this or this. Even if you say, hey, I have some unconscious and implicit biases, I behave in ways that my mind automatically reverts to or defaults to, that doesn't equate to you being a bad person. So you can have unconscious and implicit bias and still be a good person. You can still love, you can still meet people's needs, etc. So we can, as an organization, look at this work and say, we can have high expectations and we can do this work well. We can we can really look at our culture and challenge our employees to elevate their standard of conduct, and we can also take care of those employees as well. So I think that we need to have this and thinking more frequently, as opposed to either or thinking. And you just said, with the Black Lives Matter, etc. Insert an and in there. Black Lives Matter and you matter. Again, there are certain external forces that we have to acknowledge have marginalized people, have held them back from reaching that self-actualization, and we get to play a part in really elevating the humanity of a people, of a certain group of people that share an identity, that have been set back due to certain policies and laws that have been put in place, certain practices. And we recognize that the system wasn't created by people that live today, but they can use their privilege to start to affect change. And it starts by recognizing the humanity in each other, that we are responsible for each other's well-being. That is how we become a society that really, really reaches its full potential. And there's powerful data to show that societies where inequities are diminished really thrive. Everyone benefits from that type of society. And that is kind of my approach and my mission
Yeah,
to
it's
explore.
awesome. It's very basic. It reminds me of like tribalism, like, tribes from Native Indians to just Africans, about how you learn growing up that they had tribes and they were, the hunters, and there were, um, gatherers, and each person within that tribe had a job, and there was a lot of close intertwined relationships. There was community events. There were things that really were culturally important that tied the tribe together. I think what you're saying is humanity is a culturally important variable that helps to start a conversation, that um, helps to steward a mission of not only equality, but just even having the conversation. And language is the conduit through which we create and be with one another. And I love what you said about using the word and. I learned a while ago from this education and empowerment um, class that I was in for like a year and a half, was instead of but, always use and.
Yes.
It's kind of the same concept. But it's tough though, because people aren't accustomed to that type of binary way of being, that you can actually be two ways at the same time. We're so used to, it's either just one way or the other. Um,
Yes.
I think the internet has contributed to that type of polarity. Obviously, the political climate has contributed to that type of polarity. Um, but what you're doing is, it's really, really powerful. You're going against the grain.
Yes. And I think, celebrating each other's humanity is saying that we see your difference and we celebrate your difference. And you have a unique perspective of the world that I want to understand and learn from. In addition, we also have to get to a place where we agree to disagree, in terms of like, we are not meant to be in echo chambers where we are skipping together, saying the same thing, etc. Part of being human is being able to have a different value system and belief system and engaging in a dialogue and not having closure at the end is okay. But at the end of the day, if we can go to the fundamental fact of, I will be kind to you, I will meet your need. If I see you without a shirt on your back, let me help you fulfill that need. If I see that you're hurting, let me understand your pain and try to alleviate that pain. There is a humanity supersedes our political ideologies. Humanity supersedes our how we want to view what the government should be doing. If we can start with our humanity and agree to lead from there and then engage in dialogues that we might not agree with, but still lead with kindness, with joy, with an ability to show compassion and empathy, we will progress as a society. The legacy we will leave in that kind of society will be a lot more powerful than the divisive society.
Yeah, this conversation, I had a very similar conversation with Xavier Brandon. Are you familiar with this
I'm not.
individual? So he's a member of the New Albany community. He experienced, an issue with law enforcement that really impacted him, and he stood up for racial equality. He's been an active member of the community for Black Lives Matter. Really, really smart guy, and we were kind of exploring perspective and how your feelings on a particular matter, be it race, inequality, it's all about perspective. And he was saying that it's not that one is the absolute truth, like it's like divinity. It's just one person's perspective. And it's very insightful how, what he was saying about how to look at something from perspective, and you're shedding a perspective about humanity, which is,
Yes.
it's very powerful. A lot of it just deals with compassion. I don't know if everyone is so compassionate with themselves. Generally, external compassion starts with internal.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons I got off social media, even though I'm doing a social media show. Don't I don't read a lot of the comments. I defriended like a couple hundred people because I was finding it was decreasing my sense of actual compassion. I was constantly comparing myself to the Joneses. So I can see the internet having a direct correlation to a lack of humanity. That's my perspective.
I agree with you, and in numerous studies, this is where our biased mindsets come from. We learn things from what society tells us is important. We passively engage with information that inhabits what is called our unconscious mind. And there are three layers to the mind. There's a conscious mind or working memory, what you're aware of right now. There is the pre-conscious mind, which is available memory. So if I asked you for a phone number or something, you might be able to recall it. That's available memory. And there is an unconscious mind. That is where your memories throughout your life are stored. That is where your beliefs and your values, and 95% of our behavior is from your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind stores pictures and makes association with those pictures. So if what you're exposing yourself to is what is on social media, your perceptions of beauty will be impacted by that. Your impressions of different people groups will be impacted like that. And the way your mind works is it forms a reference point. When you encounter somebody, your mind digs to that reference point and says, where have I seen this person before? And then fills in the rest. And then you start to act out of that reference point or that information that you are unveiling from your unconscious mind. So as you're saying, if we passively just sit and just receive this information, it's driving our behavior. But we have to now consciously and intentionally produce a counter narrative from what we believe is true. And as we engage at the point of celebrating people's humanity and celebrating the differences and saying, don't let my mind assume something about somebody without them actually giving me a reason to think that way about them. We can really untrain our minds to think like that. And I think your point is right. The reason why media and social media are so divisive is because we are constantly passively bypassing our conscious mind and feeding our unconscious mind. And if 95% of my behavior comes from there, whatever society is telling me about someone is how I will react to them.
Yeah. The challenge is you get an immediate dopamine hit every time you post something and you check for people to engage with it. You know, it's like kind of representation of your ego if someone is acknowledging you, commenting, liking, you know, and that dopamine hit can be really addictive.
Yes.
The challenge is that what people are posting is the best versions and the worst versions of themselves. You ever go to like Yelp or review sites? There's like 5 stars and 1 stars. And it's funny because um, I usually don't pay attention to many of the 5s or 1s. I think the 4 stars that are kind of in the middle somewhere are more of the and statements, the malleable, flexible consideration of binary of 2 thoughts at the same time. Well, they were good at this, not so good at this, you know, in a business. Yelp in particular is one that I always check for like business reviews. Um, well, what's cool about what you do is you're implanting at a very formative age experiences that will shape the unconscious mind of students for the rest of their lives. It's kind of like a ripple effect. You're
Correct.
the rock that's creating this ripple, and who knows, you might have the next president of the United States in your class.
And that's what keeps me motivated. At the end of the day, there's a very powerful quote by Saint Ignatius that said, and I'm going to paraphrase and butcher it as well, is, show me a man at 7 years old. So show me a boy at 7 and I can tell you about the man. Meaning that children, teenagers, they are shaping their minds in a way where whatever we are teaching them now, whatever lessons and expectations we have for them now, whatever we are implanting in their minds now, they will carry into adulthood. So we have a tremendous education, so a tremendous opportunity to educate our students, especially as they leave the walls of our school to interact with a global world. We can affirm them. We can affirm their racial and ethnic identities and say, you are valuable. We celebrate you for the difference you have. We can affirm people of different identities and saying, you are worthy to be respected. You are worthy to be valued and validated as well. And when we implant that into their minds, when we start to make them safe, like Maslow said, show them that they belong, show them that they meet their esteem of the group, that they are praised and respected, they will start to unlock their full potential. How can this world not be changed if our mission is to unlock the potential of every single child that walks into our building? Our world and our society will be better for it.
Yeah, and they are, and they are. Um, the results speak for themselves. I mean, not to mention you're at the head with your faculty, and that creates the culture, the thought process, the way of thinking and approaching education. One area I always felt that humanity existed the strongest was sports. I used to play lacrosse on Long Island, and I don't know, something about being on a sports team, all with that common goal, and just like we're here to win. Get out there, work your hardest. You got to work as a team. There is no I in team, and something about sports can be very transformative. Can be very powerful in the human experience. I know we were talking about the Springbok earlier. For those of people that don't know, Springbok is a a rugby team in South Africa, very well known. Nelson Mandela was a big advocate of the Springbok, and in fact, he um, really used the Springbok team as kind of a leverage opportunity to unite people. Do you still play rugby, or rather, do you still watch rugby?
Oh, I'm an avid fan, and South Africa recently hoisted the World Cup trophy with the defeat of England, and it was particularly significant because the first black captain of South Africa was the first black captain was the one to bring the trophy home to South Africa. And as you were talking, it's so important to recognize that sports are a metaphor for life. It's a cliche statement, but it's so true that working together, having a common vision and a common goal that everybody understands, that they can articulate, will make them more motivated to reaching that full potential. Bringing out the strengths in people, working together to make up for weaknesses that one individual has, somebody has a strength in. So how do you work together to be interdependent in a way that will elevate the team to achieve its great objectives and goals? And so, if you said it so beautifully, sports offers that platform, that analogy that we can use for life. And the Springboks offered that to South Africa. South Africa, rugby was known as the white man's sport. And when South Africa started to become a democratic nation, when they started to become more integrated because of the fall of apartheid, more and more people of color started to play the sport. It started to get integrated. And in no way did we think that South Africa would become a powerhouse like it is today. But because of how rugby was often used as a platform for that unity, and there's still a lot of problems. I'm not going to say it's perfect. There's still a lot of problems, but we can see what unity and a common vision and a common goal can do. In beyond the odds, South Africa won the World Cup in 1995 because of the fact that it was going through this process of unity as a nation. We're uniting as a rainbow nation, they called it. And that support of our team elevated us to the point where we beat the mighty All Blacks. And nobody was giving us a chance. And so there is a spirit that is formed. There is such a spirit of that is created when we are unified that can really unlock the potential of our society and our teams.
Yeah, I mean, sports also is good for the mind and the body. I think a lot of Americans in particular are lazy about exercise, and exercise changes your state. And if you could change your state, you could change your story. Your story is often the conversation you're having with yourself. So if you could change your state, you can change that conversation. If you could change that conversation, you could take proactive action. This isn't stuff I made up. I learned it through just like coaching seminars and things. And that's one of the things I always loved about sports is it's a great way of changing your state. You just feel better
Yes.
when you're playing sports. So yeah, I miss it as an adult. I like bike ride, occasionally play golf, but I don't have that same brothership that I used to have in
Yes.
lacrosse and soccer.
Mark, your body, your brain in particular, releases this chemical called, which are called endocannabinoids. So cannabis actually mimics endocannabinoids, which are produced naturally by your body. And they find that endocannabinoids do a few things. They relieve pain, they help your immune system, you're more healthy, your state of mind changes. But they're also discovering that endocannabinoids actually open you up to be able to bond more effectively with people. So you talk about that brotherhood, you talk about that community. Oftentimes, community is created when you're doing a physical activity, be it a class or when you're doing physical movement together, there is a synergy that is created. And it's because of the fact that these chemicals that are released by the body and by the brain open you up more to experience people and open you up more to be open to hearing about people's lives and experiences, and bonds start to form from there. So you are talking about a concept that has been shown and researched and proven that those people that move together stay together and connect with each other.
Yeah.
And so that brotherhood you're talking about that is formed often on, or sisterhood on sports teams or whatever, that often occurs because we are primed to move together
Yeah.
and form relationship in that way.
Yeah. And I mean, the equivalent nowadays is like the Peloton, is that we're creating the connectivity through the internet while taking, actually being physically active. I miss going and not only playing sports, but also I used to box a lot. Just go to boxing class and things like that. It reminds me I got to get back into something, anything. I have my boxing stuff downstairs, and I just have to actually start using it more often.
Yes.
Yeah. So, hey, I got to tell you, we covered a lot of ground. I could talk to you easily for another hour. I mean, we just zipped through an hour.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. So, just in closing, and I'll kind of cut this as the outro. For anyone that wants to learn more about you, Synergy Consulting Services, learn how they can improve their culture, use humanity as an opportunity to improve culture, improve communication, and ultimately impact their bottom line. Where do they find you, and how do they reach out to you?
Excellent, Mark. Thank you for the opportunity. You can find us at www.synergyconsultingcompany.com. When you go on there, you can look at a few services we provide, and you can also fill out a form at the bottom to get on our mailing list. In addition, if you want to email us, it's synergyconsultingco2@gmail.com. And just shoot us a question or a comment that you may have, maybe following this conversation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have as well. I'm passionate about this work. It's essential for us to take this moment in time and to be very strategic in this moment in time, because we are on our mission as humans is to create a better world and a better society for our families and our children, and to leave this world a better place than we found it. And so if you can jump onto that mission, then I think we are in good hands.
You're a good man, Pascal. I know why your wife Crystal loves you. You're a good man.
Thank you, Mark. And you are too. I've been so encouraged by this conversation, and I'm
Good.
thanking you for this platform, because it's important for us to be able to share and cross the divide that we often have, and really engage in a meaningful dialogue.
Yeah. How's Judah, by the way? Your 6-month-old. Is he? What's he doing during the day?
Oh, he's amazing, man. My wife stays home part-time, and I've been on summer break, which has not felt like a break, but at least I can be home. And during this time of the stay-at-home order and quarantine, I've been able to kind of be around and be present. And so as we transition back to the school year, he will be we will be looking at daycare or some nannies and stuff like that to really take care of him. But I've been really lucky and blessed to have this time with the family. So it's
Awesome.
been amazing.
Awesome. Well, please thank Crystal. I'll also shoot her an email for connecting us. We met at an open house that I hosted in New Albany, I don't know, maybe 6 or more months ago.
Yes.
And she just said in passing what your role was and who you are, and I saved it. And then fortunately, when I reached out to you, I was really happy that you were open to speaking with me. So thank you.
Yes. You're very welcome, Mark. Thank you so much. This is an amazing platform. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Pascal, you have a great weekend. Love and peace. And stay in touch, okay? We'll definitely stay in touch with one another. Maybe grab a coffee when the
Yes.
madness kind of passes.
I would love to do that. I would love that. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, man.
All right.
Later.
Bye. Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.